Next, steps. You've done your research, you've taken this training, and now you're ready to move forward on a solar power project. In this lesson, we're going to look at what are the steps to install a solar PV system. We'll go through each of these steps in more detail, but this outlines what this lesson is going to look like. We're going to talk about selecting a contractor, checking the costs, checking the contracts, comparing bids, system handover and documentation, system owner responsibilities, and system installer responsibilities. So for this first step one is selecting the contractor. So where do I look for a qualified contractor? Well, that can vary, of course, and there's a lot of things that we'll discuss in this lesson here today that are going to be really dependent on the local market. And so I'll revisit that a number of times as we go through some of these steps in the process here. But a good one to start with is asking for recommendations from any of your friends and family. Do you know people who have bought solar already? Are they happy with the contractors that they used? Can you look for solar installations in progress in your area? Are you seeing projects go in? And can you figure out who's doing the most work around you? If you see a local solar site, can you visit the solar job site and ask contractor questions? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how the site is. But if people are installing and selling solar in your area, they might be very happy to talk with you about what your potential needs are and continue to sell projects in the region there. We want to check if there's any local business quality monitoring organizations. In a lot of areas, there are types of companies that keep track of businesses and whether they do a good job or bad job. Could be online reviews, could be a lot of different things. And so whether there's a local one or we're looking at online reviews for companies to find out if there's happy or satisfied customers out there, we want to just do a little bit of asking questions and some online investigation to find out who's doing work in my area, and what sort of projects there might be available. Mentioned at the bottom here, sometimes we have regional solar, what we call a solar energy industry association. Sometimes those are industry groups where they might have listings of member companies, or there might also be things like local government approved solar contractors. There's a lot of places around the world where either a country or a city or a state has a local requirement for solar contractors to be approved to do work in the area. And starting with some of those lists gives us a great place to begin to hunt for a contractor here. So that's some of the things we can look at to try to find local contractors in our area. And if we're in a place where it's a new solar market and there hasn't been much solar business before, it might be a little harder to find some local contractors, or you may have to bring people in from a neighboring town or area. So you're just going to have to start the search based on who's doing work around you. Another part of that is what questions to ask the contractor. So these are things I would start with is, how long have you been in business? And there's a lot of times where solar companies will start out of other existing businesses, like it's an electrical construction company or an engineering firm or some sort of structural or plumbing or other roofing applications where people decide to they have a business and they want to grow their business into solar, and so they might start a new branch of their company or start offering solar services. So I would ask, how long have they been in business overall? How many solar projects have they completed? That's an important one. You don't really want to be the first client, for a new solar company. You'd like to know that they've done quite a few projects in your area. So trying to find that out first is really important. Are they licensed and insured to install solar in your area? That's an important one as well. Especially if there's not a well-developed market, what are the licensing and insurance requirements, and are they carrying them? Do they have a reference list that you're allowed to contact to talk to some of their other customers? Can they show you other projects that are similar to the type of projects that you're looking for? I would ask them, where are they located? Where's their primary headquarters? Do they have multiple offices? How big of a company they are? And then what's their service territory? If we're looking at things like maintenance and upkeep, how far away are they if there's a problem with your system and you need a quick response. So that's a few of the things I would start with by asking a local contractor. The other things we want to look at is credentials. So what solar credentials should I check to see if the contractor holds? Well, there's a few, and this, of course, is also can be really variable based on an area and how developed a market is. So I would say, do they have any solar-specific certifications? Proof of technical training and knowledge? Are there certifications regionally that are required, to be an electrical contractor, a building contractor, a plumbing contractor, those types of certifications? Or do they have any solar-specific licenses? Licenses usually mean that we have formal permission issued by a government entity to do this type of business. And it might be solar-specific licenses, or it might just be a general electrical or contractor's license as well. So we need to investigate what that is in your area. There's other certifications that exist out there, or licenses that are kind of independent of a local government entity. We have this one called the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. That's a certification based in the United States, but it's seen, it's held in high regard around the world. In South Africa, there's one called a PV Green Card. It's what gives people permission to do work. And then the Clean Energy Council PV Installer Accreditation in Australia. These are just types of examples of things that might be out there in your region. And so based on where you are, you can look to see if there's any sort of specific certifications or licenses. Also, things I'd ask is, have they taken solar training courses? And there might be some local or regional solar training courses, or have they taken any of the more internationally recognized training courses like we see below? Things from Solar Energy International, RENAC, Shams Global Solutions out of Oman, the Global Sustainable Energy Solutions from Australia, or the Etihad ESCO programs in Dubai. These are just a number of the internationally recognized solar training programs that are out there that people can take to become solar professionals. Another question you're going to have to find out is, what are the local permitting and regulatory requirements? What's it take to do solar in your area? Not only from a contractor standpoint, but from a project standpoint. What permissions are needed to get a permit and do this sort of work that's going to be local. So we want to look for these local specific requirements so we know what they are, because that's also going to affect timeline and system cost and things like that. So we want to ask our contractor for municipal requirements, if there's any. So there might be cities and states or countries that there's no requirements to do the work for solar. Some places have a lot of requirements. Things can be like building department plan reviews, for example, structural permitting, electrical permitting, fire department or civil defense reviews. These are all possible. They're not always required. Maybe one area does electrical only and another area does building only, and someplace else does all of these and more. We also want to ask our contractor for utility specific requirements, if there are any, if we're talking about a utility connected system. Things that can come from the utility side could be interconnection agreements. So if my solar system is going to connect with the utility grid, what sort of a contract agreement do we have to be legally interconnected with the utility system? We also want to look at net metering agreements. Net metering means if I'm connected to the utility system, then if I export energy back into the electrical grid, how do I get credited? And what's the program for import and export and energy costs when I send power back into the grid? Things like that. So that could be a net metering agreement. Some utilities require things like commissioning tests, where they want to see a form filled out about the test process, or they may want to be on site depending on the size of the system, or if it's a utility that's new to solar, they might want to be on site to see testing and commissioning. And then sometimes utilities will require final approval or final inspection of the system before it is put online. And like I said, sometimes these things fall into the utility side, sometimes they fall into the municipal side, and they can mix depending on what the local jurisdiction rules are, what the local rules and guidelines are. Now, the other thing is going to be looking at cost. So once we understand that about what our rules and guidelines are, and we start to inquire with a contractor, we need to look at costs. And so we need to look at, and then we'll compare costing for PV systems. So what's the estimated cost for installing solar PV systems? Well, a big thing here is the cost can vary a lot with location, property type, roof material, PV module quality, a number of things that we've discussed in previous lessons here. So we tried hard to put together some ranges, and these are very wide cost ranges. And just to be familiar, a lot of times solar contractors will talk about systems installed in a cost per watt as a price per unit of power. And so you'll see things depicted as price per watt a lot of times, and that can be labor, the solar panels, the inverter prices, the permits and inspection, structural balance of systems, which can be, the racking system or the mounting, and things like electrical balance of systems, which can vary a lot as well with how much electrical equipment. Of course, these things vary so much based on type of system. Is it a small residential grid tied or a big commercial industrial plant? And that's why we see these price ranges changing so dramatically. Does it have batteries or not have batteries? Is it a very simple, easy installation with a great rooftop site? Or do we have to build a structure like a car park or an awning or something? And so that's the reason why these prices can vary so much, is the system complexity can be a huge difference in range, and the installation and local labor prices and things like that can also be a big variable in range. So local labor, whether it's electrician labor or general construction laborers, and then other taxes and tariffs and things like that can be all over the place as well, depending on where you live, what country you're in. Do you have import taxes? What sort of fees are associated with purchasing equipment and doing all this work? And so it's hard to give a straight number in this presentation because globally, with different system sizes and complexities, the range is really large. So it's really going to come down to comparing bids, talking to people in the region to find out what the normal or average prices are in the area where I'm looking to install systems. And so it's really checking across multiple contractors and asking questions as much as you can about other people involved in solar around you. So as we get into looking at the contract, not just the prices, but some of the information that should be in the contract. Well, builder contact information, of course. Who are they? Where's their offices? All the basic information from them. What's the scope of work? We need to have a real clear description of the scope of work, which should list all of our equipment that's intended to be installed on the site. We should have a design as part of the contract and a layout. Where's the solar going to go? Where's my array going to go? Where's the location of my inverter, any of my other switchgear or disconnects? If I have a battery bank, where's all that going to go? And then what do my electrical layouts look like? So that should be all part of the contract to some degree. And then things like timeline. When can they start? When should it be done? What's the process? The staging and the scheduling of the job. Of course, that'll depend on how busy the contractor is, how easy it is to get equipment, and how big the project is. Of course, the larger the project, the longer the timelines and often lead times for equipment. So that's kind of a start of what sort of things we should be looking for in our contract. Some of the other things, of course, are what's the cost? right? So financing, whether that's a total upfront price, whether we have a payment terms or a payment plan based on a number of the financial models that we've discussed in previous lessons. What sort of financing are we doing? And then what are the responsibilities and agreements here? So authorizations, permits, and inspections, how's that going to go? Who's in charge of all that? What's the warranty on the... Now, there's really two warranties at the end of the day. There's equipment warranties, and then there should be a installer or contractor warranty as well on their work. So we want to make sure we're clear about our warranties. If there's changes in the systems, how do we agree to those? What's the process for changes? Clean up on the site. How do they just take care of the sites and have everything, finished and tidy when they're all done? Especially on larger projects, it can be a lot of waste or, packaging, things like that can be as part of a bigger project. Smaller projects are a little less of a concern. What's the termination process? And so if there's an issue with the contract, how do you back out? How's that work? How's the contract? What are different ways a contract could be terminated, either by the homeowner or building owner or by the contractor if there was ever an issue? So making sure we have clear terms on the contract will definitely safeguard our projects here. So let's say, anytime we're doing work like this, especially the more, expensive a project gets, we really want to be comparing bids. In developed solar markets, it's going to be easy to get, 2, 3, 4 bids that we would want to compare across. In new solar markets, that might be challenging. And so if there's a new solar market where there's just not that many solar contractors working yet, we're going to have to try our best to get at least 2 bids to compare across. So things we want to be comparing when we look at one bid to another is things like, of course, the cost. So what's the total installed cost? But there's a lot more details to it than just the cost itself. And I would be really cautious on looking at price only. Energy production is a big one as well. We need to compare the cost and the energy production. And when we do that, we need to make sure that we're looking at the same system types and similar components as well. If one solar contractor gives you a bid and they say, oh, here's a 5 kilowatt PV system that's going to produce X, and another solar company gives you a bid for a 5 kilowatt PV system that's going to produce way more than the other one, we should catch that as a concern, that why would these two similar sized systems produce different amounts of energy? Often it's because of how the solar contractor estimates annual energy production. And we want to make sure that they're making a good estimate, not overestimating potential energy production. So really verifying not only the cost, but the system size, energy production, equipment and quality features. That's a really big one. There's a lot of very cheap equipment out there on the market that's just not going to last very long or may not have the functionality or the features that we're looking for. And then there's very good quality solar components like inverters and battery banks and things that are a high quality product out there. And so sometimes just a straight cost doesn't tell the whole story, but the quality of the equipment and making sure we have all the features that we're looking for in a system is also critical. Installer warranty I mentioned, so we need to make sure that not only does the equipment have its warranty, but the installer is going to warrant their design and their work for some period of time. And then we also want to compare operations and maintenance commitments. Some contractors will give you a system where the cost looks lower, but there's zero operations and maintenance after that. Some other ones will give you a price where maybe the price looks higher, but maybe they do 5 years or 10 years of operations and maintenance as part of that contract. So we need to make sure and just compare, make sure that we know what we're buying exactly. So when we move into the system handover documentation, so we've compared we've compared our bids, we've chosen a contractor, we've moved forward with it. So what are the other sorts of things that we need from a documents process? So here's a basic checklist. Signed contract, of course, so we have all of our details in one place. We want our system plan, so we want to know what the electrical system looks like, our schematic, our layout of our equipment, where everything is meant to go. If there's any structural or wind loading calculations that are part of that, we want that all in there. Do we have permits for our area? So if we have permits, then we want a copy of those permits, whether that's an electrical permit or a building permit or structural, whatever that happens to be. We want to make sure we have copies of those. We also want our manuals. So we want to make sure that we get any of the manuals from the equipment that we end up buying here, just to make sure as the homeowner or building owner that you have all of the, basically all the support information that you need from that contractor. Part of the equipment manuals, we would also have warranty information. And like I said, that can be product-based warranty information from the manufacturers and our installer warranty information and details in there that we want to make sure we have as part of our contract. And then system operating and instruction manuals. So sometimes a contractor will write a kind of operations manual for that project or site. Sometimes they won't. It would be something that you could ask about. And of course, that'll be dependent on what sort of things are in the operations and maintenance contract. If it's a complicated system or a very simple system, there might be different levels of operating instructions or manuals. The catch is because the manufacturers don't know where all their equipment's going to go, they don't have necessarily the whole system schematic. So a system operating or instruction manual would usually have to be developed by the contractor. So some of the things that we need to understand is the system owner. So you own the system, and there's a number of things that you should be aware of and concerned about as well. So safety concerns and warranty issues. As the system owner, what are the risks that are out there? What's now been added to my building? Well, this is all variable, of course, based on size of system, electrical voltages, whether there's batteries or not, where things are mounted. But electrical shock hazard is something that we need to be concerned about. Solar PV arrays produce DC output voltage, which can absolutely shock and hurt someone. And a lot of our PV systems, especially as they get larger, can operate at very high DC voltages that are very dangerous, could hurt or potentially kill someone. So we need to be careful about quality of wiring and installations from the contractors. We want to make sure we're looking really closely at the quality of their electrical work. But we also want to think about making sure that either you as a homeowner or anyone else who's going to be around this equipment knows to be safe around it. So if it's on a rooftop and out of the way, that might make things a little bit easier. If it's on a car park or a ground mount, how easy is it for general public or for kids if it's at a park somewhere? We don't want kids to come and climb on the mounting structures or pull on wires or things like that. We don't want adults to come and open electrical boxes. And so we just want to be aware. This is an electrical system. It has high voltages and it can hurt someone if we're not cautious about keeping people away from the electrical equipment. Like anything electrical, we have a fire hazard. Anything that's mounted on the roof, or if we have to get on the roof or elevated structure, we could have a fall hazard of falling off the roof, things like that. If it has batteries in it, there could be a chemical exposure if something happened to the batteries or if someone was doing maintenance. And then any system modifications, if you as the homeowner or system owner modify the system in any way or any of the equipment, that could void the warranty of either the equipment manufacturer or the installer. And so just be cautious that you really don't want to make any modifications to the system after it's installed, or it could be a warranty risk. So a few other things here about the system owner responsibilities. There's some things that you really should do and some things you should not do. And so it's important to know your role within your system and not to exceed your technical limitations. Of course, you bought the system, and so you want to be able to keep an eye on it. But let's look at a couple of these things here in more detail. So things you should do as a system owner: we really want you to pay attention to the system. We want to make sure that it's operating. We're looking at LEDs and displays. We want to do visual inspections to make sure there's nothing damaged or an obvious issue for production. And we want you to report problems to the contractor if anything arises. Those are the things you should be doing. Things you should not be doing: changing any programming or set points. We don't want to adjust programs or set points. Grid-tied systems really don't have a lot of programming. Battery-based systems or systems with generators and anything with a battery and larger stuff will have a lot of like charging set points, generator auto start settings, various programmings like that. Sometimes a small change can produce a big output difference in our system, and so we want to make sure we're not changing anything. We don't want to attempt to fix anything that's broken. That should be on the original contractor. It should not be the system owner responsibilities. We also never want to walk on solar modules. We can do damage by walking on or climbing on the top of solar modules. And so we don't want to encourage a system owner to go out or send a maintenance people out and walk across or move around on the solar modules. That can void the warranty, and it can create damage in ways that can reduce the output of the system. And we don't want to change any equipment or operational changes. So we just want to, there's a lot of things we don't want to do, or we could end up damaging equipment or voiding warranties if it's beyond our scope. So as far as more details a little bit here on what are the responsibilities of the building or system owner, what we really want you to do is monitor this daily operation. We want to check the performance of the system. And so maybe it's not daily. Usually when people buy a new solar system, they look at it daily, and then they look at it weekly, and then over time it becomes monthly, and then it just becomes another normal appliance as part of their building. So, but it is your job as the owner to basically check the LED lights and the equipment displays. If we have an inverter, it might have a display or LEDs that tell us some coloring on it. If there's ever an error message, we want to record the error message. We want to write down, there might be a code or something on there that the inverter or charge controller might tell us. We want to record that, especially if we reset anything or try to turn things off or on. We want to make sure we record any errors first, so we can tell either the manufacturer for technical support or the solar contractor what we've seen. If we have online monitoring, we want to check the online monitoring if it's available. That might tell us more information about what's going on the system. And if we're remote, if we're not at that site regularly, maybe that's the best way we monitor our system, is looking at the online monitoring regularly to see that everything's operating properly. We also want to check production to see that it meets our contract requirements. So that's an important one. So things like comparing production to the estimates. Now, we can't do that on a daily or monthly basis. That's usually going to be over the course of a year, because most companies are going to give you, maybe a monthly approximation, but really looking at annual production to see that the actual annual production is within our allowable tolerance range of what we were estimated. Of course, checking our online monitoring can help us verify the daily, monthly, and annual production. Looking at any system displays, any production meters we might have, that we can verify that. Now, if we're looking at small systems, let's say a small DC only type of system, the things like a lighting system on a street light, those usually don't have online monitoring. They often don't have any sort of a display. And so really with things like that, which could be like small lighting or maybe a small water pumping system, really we got to just notice, is it on? Do the lights come on when they're supposed to? And does it stay on as long as it's supposed to? So do the lights come on when the sun sets? Yes or no? Do the lights stay on for an hour or 3 hours or till dawn? Whatever they're programmed to do, are they doing that? And sometimes that's about all you can look at. And on a small DC system like that, if it has a battery, then it'd just be kind of monitoring the system. At some point, you'll see the battery quality decline, and you'll need to replace the battery banks. So what do I do if there's a problem? Okay, so some of the problems that we can look for, things on the array, could be shadows and dirt, anything that's creating a shadow on the array. Could be dust, could be whatever. We want to look for that because that could be a production issue. On the inverter, we want to record any error messages. On the charge controller, if we have batteries in our system and we have a charge controller, we want to check the display. We want to check the LEDs, record any things that we see on there if we think there's a problem. Batteries, we always want to look for signs of damage like corrosion. Well, corrosion isn't really damage. It happens over time and just needs to be cleaned up. So we need to clean corrosion off of our battery terminals as those begin, or that can create a bigger problem later. And if we have a flooded type of battery that's a lead acid that we need to add water to, we need to make sure we're checking water levels as well. That should either be done by a maintenance person, or if you're the system owner and you're going to check water yourself, then the installer company should teach you how to check and how to fill the water levels. Wiring, of course, we're always looking for damage or loose connections, anything that could create a shock or a fire hazard. And then any of those things that we see, we want to report those to our contractor or anyone for technical help. So report our findings and then schedule an inspection if we think that there's a problem with the system. So system installer responsibility. So we need to think about not only the homeowner or building owner's responsibilities, but what's the installer responsibilities of the contractor after the project delivery here. So these, of course, can vary a lot based on the what's in the contract itself. Okay, so we have things like maintenance of the system. There's going to be things that will be under warranty, so it could be part of the installer's warranty or part of the equipment warranty. So that will be an installer or a contractor's job to replace. There might be non-warranty items, or something's out of warranty, or maybe something got damaged and it's not the installer's fault that it got damaged, and so it's not a warranty claim, and that needs to be replaced under a non-warranty repair. Array cleaning varies a lot based on region. If you're in a place that gets a lot of rain regularly, then most of the time in places with a lot of rain, we usually don't wash arrays. The rain usually does fine to keep them clean enough. If you're in a really dusty area, then sometimes array cleaning is part of a contract, either an installation contract or part of an ongoing maintenance contract. So check on that. Annual maintenance checkups. Some solar contractors will offer that as a regular part of their services, and some of them don't, and that needs to be an add-on feature. On small systems, it might not be done commonly. On larger systems, having a quarterly or annual inspection at varying levels could be really important. And all of this is to ensure the system lives up to our lifetime expectations. Now, there's times where we might need other contractors or third-party involvement. That can be where our original installer is out of business or unavailable. So maybe we bought a system, we got it installed, and everything worked for a year or two, but that solar contractor went out of business and we couldn't get a hold of them. So we might need to go to finding another contractor to come in and help with a project, or a consultant in some way. So any new contractor can be of service to you by doing any upgrades, replacing equipment, or maintenance services if the original one is not available. But we also need to understand that if we have a new contractor come in, if the other contractor is still under warranty, we need to check on those warranty impacts, because having a new company come in and work on an existing system is often going to void that other company's installation warranty. So we just need to know what we're dealing with and why we would select to go to a third party or an other contractor instead of the original. Those are some of the things we want to think about when we are planning, designing, purchasing, and installing, and then maintaining and living with solar power systems. It's a very exciting time in the solar industry, and I really hope that that this course has been valuable for you, and that you can now go forward with more tools, ready to make great decisions, and hopefully have a solar-powered home, business, or city in your near future.